Chapter 5, Mishnah 2. As earlier Mishnahs did, see Chapter 1, Mishnahs 1 through 3, and Chapter 3, Mishnah 1, the next three Mishnahs discuss differences between a vow to pay market value and an erech vow. Since the previous Mishnah discussed a person who vows to donate the weight of a single limb, this Mishnah begins by discussing a person who vows to donate the value of a single limb. If a person says, I pledge to give the value of my arm to Hekdesh, we evaluate him to determine how much he is worth as a slave with this arm and how much he would be worth without this arm, and he pays the difference to Hekdesh. In this respect, the law for vows of market value is stricter than the law for erech vows. For if a person pledges the erech of his arm to Hekdesh, the vow is meaningless and he owes nothing, while if he pledges the value of his arm, he must pay the arm's value. Having mentioned an area in which vows of value are stricter than erech vows, the Mishnah discusses an area in which erech vows are stricter than vows of value. In one way, the law for erech vows is stricter than the law for vows of market value. How so? If someone says, I pledge to give my erech vow to Hekdesh, but died shortly after, before paying his pledge, his heirs must pay the pledge from his estate. In contrast, if someone says, I pledge to give my market value to Hekdesh, but died shortly after, before he could be evaluated to determine his market value, the heirs do not need to pay anything, because a vow of market value does not create a debt unless the subject of the vow is evaluated by the court to determine the amount of the vow. Once he is dead, he cannot be evaluated, because the dead have no value as slaves. Thus, the debt cannot take effect, and accordingly, the heirs do not owe anything. We mentioned above that a person cannot donate the erech value of a single limb. The Mishnah explains when such a vow is valid and when it is not. If a person says, I pledge to pay the erech value of my arm or the erech value of my leg, he has said nothing. Such vows are meaningless. Between the Torah assigns erech values only to complete living bodies and not to individual limbs. However, if a person says, I pledge to pay the erech value of my head or the erech value of my liver, he must pay his full erech value. The Mishnah gives a rule to explain why the erech of an arm or leg is different from the erech of a head or liver. This is the rule: if a person pledges the erech of a body part in which his life depends, such as the head or the liver, which a person cannot live without, he pays his full erech value. Since his survival depends on that body part, such a vow is considered as though he pledged the erech of his whole body. However, if he vows the erech of an organ or limb that he could survive without, such as an arm or leg, it is simply a vow to give the erech value of that limb. Since individual limbs do not have any erech values, the vow is meaningless and he does not owe anything.